Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and I'm not alone. I'm joined by Mr. John.
I've watched this trailer too many times.
Yes, we are going to be going through and dissecting the Metroid Dread E3 2021 trailer because, well, we did it with the Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel. That's still awkward to say. And I thought it went pretty well, and we're going to be doing it with Metroid Dread now. It's a little bit longer overall, but I don't know how much there will be to say. I've seen it a few times. Should we just dive right in, Mr. John?
I suppose so. I guess it's also worth noting there's around 20 minutes of Treehouse, and it's all pretty self-explanatory, so we'll bring up points in there when we can, but we're not going to be dissecting the entire Treehouse.
Yeah, it's that would take us too long, and also, as you say, a lot of it is self-explanatory, so we'll probably bring in a few things here and there from the Treehouse when it's relevant.
Indeed.
Right, let's begin! So, click, Nintendo Switch. What a surprise, it's a teen game. So, as you can see from this point here... No, I'm not going to even focus on that. So, Samus drops down here. I don't think there's anything of note at this point, is there? I mean, we see Samus's new suit for the first time, but we'll probably focus on that in maybe a little bit, because we can only see the back from here. One thing that is worth noting, the jets have returned as per her power suit as opposed to her fusion suit. So, I think there's clearly been some shenanigans going on from her fusion suit. This has definitely been upgraded.
Yeah, it's hard to say what's happened between the events of Fusion and Dread, because Fusion doesn't really explain where Samus is with the Galactic Federation. Are they allies still? Are they enemies? Because she disobeys them at the end. So if that's the case, did they alter her suit again, or has she done it herself? We don't really know what's going on there.
The fact that you've got these sort of strands that appear to be going over the top of the suit suggests that maybe it's not the Galactic Federation that's done this. Maybe Samus has found something herself. Maybe some other body has done her body for her. It's very hard to tell at this point, but there have clearly been some changes. And as you say, Samus has got a bit of a rocky relationship with the Galactic Federation at the best of times.
There's some interesting antagonists that we can bring up a bit later on, so it's not just the Galactic Federation. And we can mention them a bit more in just a second, though, because there's going to be a robotic figure coming up in a moment.
There is. Let's progress a little bit further. It comes up saying Metroid 5. This is interesting because it means it's the 5th Metroid game, except
Indeed.
It isn't. But it's the 5th, of the original canon, should we say. And we say, it says at the bottom there, not actual gameplay footage, which I believe to be true, but I believe that it's basically just up-resed, I think, and maybe slightly higher textures. Because I think
Probably.
A lot of this is just trailers, but not trailers, gameplay footage later on, and we'll get them in cutscenes and things like that. Not confirmed by any stretch, but we do get to see inside Samus's visor, which has also changed, but that's nothing new. Samus's visor changes all the time.
We see a very similar scene to this in the Treehouse. I'm not sure if it's quite one-to-one, but maybe, like you say, maybe this is up-resed, maybe it's just slightly different to what you see in gameplay. Maybe,
but it's nice that they said not actual gameplay footage, but you can tell when we actually start seeing gameplay footage, because it changes again, and so we get, this is where I think the gameplay footage starts. Because you can tell from things like the textures are a little bit lower, things like that, the lighting isn't quite as crisp, and I'm pretty sure I've seen this exact scene in the Treehouse. Yeah. But we get a good look at Samus's armor again. Now that I look at the front, that looks so like sort of the Prime era Varia, or, well, specifically the Varia suit, the front chest piece with those green lights. And I wonder whether maybe she's been able to somehow forage her old, parts of her old suit from Fusion, as in when it was removed at the start of Fusion.
Sure. That's very, very possible. It's also worth noting where we are right now. Samus has gone through this sort of pixelated door, and when that happens, that brings you into the any chasing areas. So they're not always chasing you. They only chase you when you go into these pixelated areas. Maybe they'll mix that up as the game goes on, but it seems that these are kind of like isolated zones where you're going to be chased around.
Yeah, I think from the Treehouse we only got to see very early bits of the game, they said. But even so, it's interesting stuff regardless, and it's kind of, in a way, kind of nice to know that certainly in the earlier parts of the game, you're not going to be constantly chased by these giant robotic things.
It's a good idea, but when you're exploring, when you're lost and you don't know where to go, you don't want to be chased around the entire time, do you?
Absolutely. Sort of as we've alluded, Maybe they'll change that as the game goes on. I kind of hope they do in a way. And it's kind of a bit of a, it sort of mixes things up a bit. But we'll have to wait and see. So let's move on a little bit. Samus looks around. Yep. And then there's a black screen. Comes back to Samus again. And this, let's wait until it's nice and close. This is the first time we see the Emmy, which is, who knows? What does it stand for, John?
I don't know what it stands for, but we do have a little bit of info on these guys. So in Sakamoto's development history video, he says the Emmy are owned by the Galactic Federation. He doesn't specify that they're hunting Samus, or that it's their intent to capture Samus, but they do own these robots at the very least.
And it kind of fits in with a lot of their style, the sort of the smooth surfaces and things like that we've seen in a lot of their stuff prior. But again, sort of things change over time. But yeah, it feels right that they are at least owned by the Galactic Federation.
And yeah, exactly what's powering them is interesting too, because they're invincible. Like Samus's missiles and any of her abilities won't impact these guys. So.
Should we see that in action? Let's see that in action. So as you can see, it sort of folds around. Its movements are very, very mechanical, which isn't surprising because it's a robot. Samus shoots it a couple of times. This is an in-game cutscene. We saw this in Treehouse as well. And a missile, and it doesn't even move. Samus immediately knows what's going on and starts running away. Samus is not having a panic attack here. She's just running away.
Now, it's not quite impossible to defeat, I guess, stagger them. In the Treehouse at one point, we see one scene where Samus goes into this almost behind-the-shoulder view, and she uses an ability to stun them temporarily. So it seems like some power-ups later on will allow you to at least maim them, but I don't think you can ever defeat them. Not
as far as we know anyway. I mean, I would be surprised if we could never defeat them, but even if it's just like, like the last sort of 20 minutes of the game. Kind of like the Ice Beam in Super Metroid, where you can finally take out the Metroids. Am I saying that right, or am I thinking of a different Metroid game?
No, you're thinking of the right thing.
Cool. That's good, because I'm a big Metroid fan. It'd be embarrassing to get that wrong. And as we can see, this is gameplay now. We'll just go through a little bit. The Emmy chasing Samus. She's got her... she can grab onto ledges just like she could in Metroid Fusion, which is amazing that was the first time you could do that. Yeah. I remember playing Fusion for the first time and forgetting that you couldn't do it in previous games.
Yeah, it's hard to go back after Fusion and Zero Mission, Samus Returns. It just feels like a natural part of her moveset now. I think it's also worth noting the HUD too, because later on you can see Samus's Aeon bar from Samus Returns, but right now you don't have it. So I imagine you start off without any Aeon powers. But right now you've got missiles, you've got your health, and that's literally it right now.
Yes, and as you can see from Samus moving here, there's like a red, essentially target around here, and I assume that's a visual indicator to let you know that you're being targeted by the Emmy, even if they're not on screen.
Yeah, and if they haven't found you yet, you start beeping, which shows you where you've been and where the Emmy can track you. So you're always being pursued. But I think once they've found you, that red ring sort of follows. It shows you that you're being pursued. Yeah,
which is a handy visual thing, because it could probably be done with audio as well. But just from an accessibility point of view, a visual thing is good as well. I also think maybe the mini map. It doesn't always glow red, I don't think, so that would maybe be another visual indicator that, watch out, there's an Emmy about.
Yeah, also, there's a mini-map. I don't think any 2D game has had a mini-map on the screen at all times. I guess Samus Returns on the bottom screen.
Not a proper one, but like Fusion, you just had the little blocks. But this is way more detailed and everything. You can actually see the shapes of rooms and things like that and platforms, which you definitely did not have in Fusion. Which was, I mean, I suppose you could argue that you got it in Prime, but just totally different kind of game. So I think we can forgive that one. Shall we move on, or is there anything else you've noticed?
Yeah, I think we can pretty much move on. It looks like there's another... I mean, we know that you get the spider crawl later on, which is very much like the spider ball, and that lets you hang on to the blue surface on the top right, and that will likely bring it down. But it seems that's something you return to later. But I guess when you return later, you're probably still being pursued by the Emmy. So you're returning to an area to use an ability slowly while being pursued. So that's going to be pretty scary.
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose I just noticed as well, Samus has got a maximum of 17 missiles, which, I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but they've always been in increments of 5 in the past, haven't they? Or was it 2
I
in
think Samus
Metroid
Returns
2?
might have had 2, but yeah, a 5-1 definitely in the older games. I guess what do we start with is another question too, because Samus doesn't have her Aeon abilities yet. So did she start with 15 missiles maybe and find a 2 upgrade, or did she start with 10? I'm not entirely sure.
No, again, we'll just have to wait and find out, I think. But Samus then goes through this door, gets herself into a bit of a sticky situation, as you can probably imagine, and the Emmy touches her, and that's not good. And then it says Metroid. No. But let's just freeze on this. So we know from the treehouse that this is instant death. If an Emmy captures you, it is game over, at least in the early part of the game. Maybe you get sort of something a bit like kind of like The Last of Us, where you can get a perk to sort of fight off the clickers. Maybe a bit like that, but at least right now it is game over through and through.
Yeah, we've seen Samus slide under an Emmy, so you can get out of these situations, but if they've touched you, then that's it. There's no way of getting out of that.
It's a bad time for sure. And I just want to say very quickly, going back here, just how intimidating this thing looks, despite being smooth, not really having... I mean, it's got that glowing thing in the middle. It's kind of an eye, but it doesn't really have any eyes or a mouth, and yet they've somehow managed to make this thing look really intimidating, which I think is genuinely really impressive.
Yeah, I love when it pins her down, there's just this tight grasp, and it looks like there's just no way of escaping that. Like, it's almost like it's gone into the ground, and Samus just can't even move. Yeah,
it is a frightening-looking sausage, to say the least.
And she's trying to push it off, too. Her arm is wrestling with it, but there's just no restraint.
Yeah, it's certainly a thing. But then we get to see that it is indeed called Metroid Dread. That was a special moment when they first revealed that.
That was incredible. A name 16 years in the making, and it's finally real.
But then we move on and we see this brand new area, and it's all sort of cavey.
Yeah, what's kind of cool too is in the treehouse they specified that most Metroid games have you starting on the surface of a planet and moving down, whereas this one you actually start at the core of the planet and you make your way up. Which that's kind of got my mind wondering is how did Samus get to the center of the planet? And like maybe she's being imprisoned here by like the Galactic Federation, and that's the reason that their robots are pursuing her around. Maybe it's something like that.
Maybe. I would be surprised if the Galactic Federation would want her killed, per se, by the Emmy. But we don't know whether something's gone wrong or anything like that. We do get a sort of a glimpse of maybe something later on. But it's, I wouldn't be surprised if she was imprisoned here and then something goes awry. The Galactic Federation do a whoopsie, as they so often do. And she takes the opportunity to break out, but the Emmy have gone a bit funky. It's entirely possible. Although she does behave like she hasn't fought the Emmy before when she fires at it before, because she doesn't know that it won't do any damage. So who knows? But definitely food for thought, I think. Going up here, there's a weird sort of blob as an enemy.
Yeah, I've seen some people a bit worried that you're just going to be fighting robots the entire time. That's not the case.
No.
You're definitely fighting aliens as well.
Yeah, there's plenty of aliens, as we'll see later on. That one doesn't look too much of a threat. We see the wall jump there, which isn't exactly surprising, but it's a bit of a video error there. It is at least... it's nice to know that it's there, you know?
Yeah, and I don't think it's a power-up either, because you only have... I think you're on your default health bar there, so you probably have it right at the start.
Yeah, and again, 17 missiles. So it's going to be interesting to see the increments. I'm pretty sure we had 17 in the previous shot as well. And then here, 27. What's going on?
And we have the Aeon bar now.
We've seen
one Aeon ability that wasn't in Samus Returns, and that is the mask that allows you to go invisible, and we'll see that a bit later on.
We'll see that later, yeah.
Yeah, that consumes your Aeon power. So it looks like it's exactly the same premise as Samus Returns, and it was done really well there, so I'm excited to see it return.
Yeah, what do you make of this Chozo statue down here at the bottom?
So they were also in Samus Returns, and they will refill your missiles or health. And I think we've seen them in the treehouse refill your health as well.
Okay, so it's just a refill station then, or a recharge station.
Yeah, but the fact that it's a Chozo is interesting though, and that shows that this is definitely that the Chozo had been here before. And there was a huge amount of lore in Samus Returns when beating the game about the Chozo, and how they basically created the Metroids in that game. So I'll go over very briefly how the lore was sort of unraveled in there. So basically, the Chozo went down to SR388 and they found the X-Parasite. And the X-Parasite was like the most deadly thing in the universe. So to combat it, they made the Metroids. And then the Metroids started evolving, and then they had to imprison them down there. So that's the reason that the statues of the Chozo are all over SR388, because they basically scavenged that planet. And then at the end, this is something you have to kind of discuss, because the Chozo are quite a big part of Dread. And that's that the Chozo basically combat each other, and they murdered part of the race. So there's an evil species of Chozo out there, which seem to be in this trailer. So I've got to imagine that they have a pretty significant part of this planet if their statues are around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the Chozo definitely had their fingers in quite a few pies when they were, I don't want to say alive, because we'll see later on they're still alive, but you know, actually prolific, should we say.
But yeah, that's a refill station.
Yes. We also have another alien here being blasted. Looks like sort of maybe a series of aliens, or like some sort of centipede or something. I'm guessing those yellow things at the top and the bottom are kind of like burrows for it, and it kind of goes in and it loops round, maybe.
Yeah. Also, free aim is back from Samus Returns.
Yes.
So she stands still when doing this, and you can basically aim wherever you want to aim.
Which is a big bloomin' deal, frankly.
It is.
And is something that I think the Metroid, certainly the 2D Metroid series, has kind of been gagging for. And we finally got in Samus Returns. So really pleased to see it return, because, yeah, it's a big deal. This is interesting here. We see the wide shot.
Yeah, I wonder if this is an Aeon ability as well. I'm not sure if the bar is draining, but Samus Returns had a rapid fire mode. It doesn't seem like it's bringing the yellow bar down at all.
No,
so maybe it is just a new beam.
Yeah, it might be just a little bit more like sort of Metroid 2, the original, where you got the wide beam and things like that.
Yeah.
And Super Metroid, where you just get different beam power-ups, and maybe you can swap between them, maybe on the fly, maybe not. Again, these are all so many things that we'll just have to wait for, sadly. I am just going to go back and check something, though. There's no mini-map in this area.
Oh, yeah. I wonder if you can disable it then. The Switch has a
Maybe.
lot more functions than 3DS had. I mean, you have the D-pad, you have the analog stick, you have the minus buttons. There's definitely a lot of possibilities for getting it off the screen.
Or maybe you have to get the map for the area, just like, like the Prime games and so many others, and Fusion.
Sure. Yeah, that'd make a lot of sense.
Yeah, because, again, I was actually looking to see the outline. The outline is yellow here, and then it's yellow later on as well. So that definitely suggests that the Emmy is, the red border says Emmy about. We see a couple more enemies as well. We've got some sort of, what appears to be some sort of robot thing, some sort of turret maybe, shooting some sort of beam, and then something that looks a lot like sort of like a war wasp, but not entirely. This is a brand new planet as well. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, which I'm quite annoyed about. Can you remember, John?
I can't remember either, but the environment's so interesting, though. We've had sort of the mechanical structure in Fusion a little bit, but this is something very different. It's a mix of alien and robotics, and it looks fascinating.
It does, yeah. There's something that reminds me very much of Metroid 2 about it, that had some sort of more industrial areas, but not to this extent by any means. But that may well have been just a limitation of the original Game Boy. It's hard to tell. But moving on, we see Samus destroying blocks with missiles. That's nothing especially new. But this looks like to be maybe a very cold area. We see what could well be some sort of like, maybe some sort of, or it could be webbing or something or it's hard to tell. But there's something drooping and dripping, and it's not especially pleasant to look at.
It feels cold. You can see the vapor kind of coming off the ground. And I love the lighting here, too. Everything's very dark. And it's kind of being illuminated by Samus as well. Like, if you look at the lights on her shoes or on her shoulder, it's sort of lighting up the environment around her.
I miss light-up shoes. I never had any, and I always wanted some.
That's not what came to my mind, but I can imagine Samus is wearing those now.
Moving on, we see her dropping down. And this is the return of the melee counter. And that's definitely some sort of alien, again, not mechanical.
Yeah, it's been refined too. They said in the treehouse a few times that, they didn't say explicitly, but a problem with Samus Returns was a lot of enemies, you had to sort of sit around and wait for them to counter you, and they've changed that. So in a moment, we'll see the melee dash as well, which allows you to just run directly into an enemy and hit them without waiting for them to have to hit you first. So that's a big improvement.
What do you think that thing on the left is?
Oh, interesting question. That could be... it could be either maybe a health refill station, because we saw the Chozo one earlier, which might be missiles.
Yeah.
Or it could be a elevator, maybe?
Maybe. My first thought is that it is health, because if you look at the sort of the gem or something, the purple thing, it's a very similar shade of purple to the energy tanks.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, which is fun to see. Apart from that, I can't really see much in this area.
No, just lots of background details, like all these monitors and things like that. It kind of looks like either a research station or maybe even like a health station, like a hospital area.
Maybe. We can see the same sort of like drooping things from before just in the background. I'm starting to think that maybe they are sort of like webbing, some sort of webbing from an alien or something. But,
yeah,
you know, it's clearly the same sort of area, which is kind of fun to know. Whack! Take that. And, oh, blimey, there's a lot of movement going on here, so...
Yeah, so we're seeing the melee dash here. So Samus is running straight into the enemy and just hitting them. There's no need to wait around. You can just whack them.
Which is, that is very, very welcome, frankly.
Yeah. I like the counter. I think the counter can be really good in boss battles. But there are moments in Samus Returns where you're just sitting around and waiting for the yellow light to appear. And this seems like a massive improvement.
Absolutely, yeah. And I quite like the design of the weird sort of pustule hedgehog here. I like it.
Yeah. It feels like it's kind of been almost like taken over by these little spuds on top of it.
Or there's some sort of, maybe it's babies, it's eggs or something.
Maybe.
Pustule the hedgehog, do not steal. So then we move on to, and we see this door. Now, we saw this in the treehouse as well. And this is basically something that you have to coax out and then defeat in order to get through the door, which is somewhat similar to like the eye doors that we found in Fusion, but a little bit more involved from the looks of it.
Yeah. Instead of just sort of waiting for them to open their eye and shoot them with a missile, it seems like you're waiting for the right moment to counter them. Which
is nice. It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah. Very visceral.
Very visceral, and it's just so fast, this bit. This is definitely some other sort of robot again. And so it does look like we're getting an interesting mix between mechanical and alien foes, which is good. In fact, this reminds me somewhat of there's a much larger like boss that looks similar to this in Fusion. It sort of crawls along the ground and everything. It drills in. I don't think it's the same, but it definitely reminds me of it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. The variety is great. Again, about Samus Returns, it was a Game Boy remake. Of course, there are going to be limitations, but the enemy variety in that game is nothing compared to what we've seen here. There's so many different enemies so far.
Really, really exciting stuff. And gets destroyed. Samus coming out. Whoa, let's go back. Samus coming out of something. This could be a lift. Or it could be a save station, maybe?
I'm thinking save station, but yeah, it could also be a lift.
Yeah. The fact that one thing, just a really minor thing, if you look at the stairs, they sort of pop out.
Oh, they do. That's cool. I think this is a boss. We've seen something in the treehouse, I believe, where it's got like these red balls shooting out, almost like Mother Brain's balls at the end of Metroid 1. I don't think it's a callback to that, but it looks very similar visually. That's interesting, actually, because when I first saw this trailer, my first thought of this was that it was some sort of security cam type system. It definitely looks like an eye. I don't think that can be argued, but tying into something that comes not immediately afterwards, so we'll go back. Do you have anything else to say regarding this? Not really. I think it's just, it might be like a security bot that then comes out and then you fight it, perhaps. But yeah, it's definitely a boss, and I do wonder if it's trying to take some sort of inspiration from Mother Brain. I don't think so, but it's just a very similar projectile they fire. It might just be a nice little callback for fans of the series. Maybe. But then moving on, we see Samus again, and this is a good moment to really show
her arm cannon is really narrow at the end. Like, it looks quite different.
Yeah, that's a pretty big overhaul design-wise.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's probably one of the biggest design changes here. I mean, the color scheme is, of course, different to prior games, but that arm cannon, completely different.
I mean, the color scheme is somewhat similar to the PED suit from Corruption.
From Prime 3, yeah.
But again, you know, at the end of the day, there are only so many colors, and it doesn't look exactly the same, so, you know.
Indeed.
Yeah. But then we get to see a green Emmy. And I have a horrible feeling that different colored Emmys will do different things in order to try and stalk you.
I think you might be right. In fact, we see a Emmy climbing on the ceiling in just a few scenes. It might be the next scene, in fact.
We do, yeah. Well, let's find out, shall we? So we see Samus doing a slide move there. That's semi-new. And then doing Morph Ball. Morph Ball's back, baby. This structure that she's in, though, it's the mouth of something. It's some sort of creature, or at the very least a depiction of a creature, some sort of statue.
Yeah, and this is something we see in Metroid quite a few times. As in prior games, you generally go through a statue resembling a boss. So perhaps this is leading to a boss's lair.
Maybe. It. I think the thing that it reminds me most of is that until you get I've forgotten the name of it now, the space jump, the higher jump, in Super Metroid. There's like this sort of ledge that you can't reach, and it's got that design specifically so that you remember it and that you know to come back to it. So it may well be trying to do something similar here, you know, sort of, hey, come back when you got the morph ball type thing. Yeah,
it's interesting at the morph ball and the slide, because they're very similar properties. They're both about going under things. I guess speed is of the essence with the slide, and when you're being pursued, you're gonna wanna, you don't want to transform into a ball and then slowly make your way through. So I think that's the main property of the slide, just the speed.
I just find it wonderfully delicious that Samus still can't crawl.
Yeah, she's getting there.
She'll get there eventually. And it's interesting to note that this is an area that they haven't discovered, because if you look at the minimap, there are areas that are grayed out, and I believe maybe get filled. Yes, you can see it just getting filled in.
Yeah.
So clearly, maybe you get the map, but then you have to fill it in yourself. Or maybe it is you can just disable the minimap. Or maybe it was it's a debug build and it was an oversight on the trailer creation.
Maybe.
Entirely possible. But then we move on, and this is
Adam. They've said I think it was either the development video or the treehouse, but they specified that this is Adam from Metroid Fusion.
That's interesting. I did not expect Adam to come back, to be brutally honest.
Nor did I, but it kind of adds to the possibility of this being a Galactic Federation place, because why else would there be these giant monitors everywhere?
Yeah. I'm surprised I missed that. It must be the whirlwind of E3. That's genuinely really surprising, because I assume you're talking the AI Adam, not Adam Malkovich.
Yeah, not the actual human Adam.
Yeah.
But at the end of Fusion, the AI kind of gets a conscience and helps you out. So he helps you betray the Galactic Federation. So it seems like they're still on your side if you're still going to be going through these monitors to talk with them. They didn't use them, interestingly. They said like, this is Adam, and then they kept walking around. So I wonder if they're hiding something in there.
Maybe.
They also said, though, that this game wouldn't be that guided. So I wonder, like in Fusion, Adam would often highlight where you're meant to go, and I don't know if that's going to be the case with this one. They say that he gives you hints, but whether that's going to be like, go right here, I don't think that they're going to do that again.
Yeah, I think it was something that not everyone got along with in Fusion. I personally didn't mind it, but then again, my first experience with Metroid was Metroid 2, which is not easy to navigate, certainly not for like a 5-year-old or however old I was at the time. So, sort of when I was a little bit older, something that actually guided me was a big help. Would I prefer that this time around? Absolutely not. But who knows? Maybe there is a more sort of you have the option to be a little bit more guided with a different difficulty mode or something like that. Or you talk to Adam, and then if you talk to him again, he's like, he just, he says, sort of, I've analyzed and you need to go here or something.
I think I know what it's going to be. See, you talk to Adam, and you scan the Samus amiibo, and then he'll show you where to go.
Maybe there'll be an Adam amiibo, and it's just a blank base, because it's an abstract concept. Okay, so moving on, we then see this. This looks like a fallen... Like, that could even be the security bot that we saw earlier.
It might be. Yeah, we've seen Samus sort of absorb enemies and then get power out of them.
Yeah.
I think it might have even been the charge shot that... No, that's just lying around. I think it might have been an Aeon ability they got that out of. So maybe when you defeat this boss, you get the cloaking function that we've seen just a moment.
Could well be. But yeah, I remember seeing the charge beam is just a power-up you can pick up. And it looks just like, you know, sort of the power-ups from, like, the older games, which I love. Because they just look like weird little dinosaurs holding letters. But moving on, this
there he is.
The scene. That is undeniably a Chozo, and I believe the first properly living Chozo in the series, at least in, you know, sort of in the events of Metroid, as we know. Yes, there have been, you know, we know that Chozo lived before. Chozo raised Samus and stuff like that. And Samus's suit is Chozo, and we've had things like living Chozo statues. But this is just an actual, just alive Chozo.
Yeah, this is big. Chozo have always been lore. Like we've had, like, I think there were some Chozos in Prime 2, but it's always just been about the background.
Weren't they?
Yeah. So it's always been about their background and history. Whereas this, you know, it's a living Chozo. And the design is really close to the evil Chozos from Samus Returns, right down to the blue orbs on their shoulders. So I don't think they're an ally. But what's even more interesting is in the Metroid history video by Sakamoto, he says that this is Samus's last journey with the Metroids. This is the last chapter in the Metroid, not necessarily the last Metroid story, but the last chapter with Metroid and Samus's saga. So there could be big consequences between the Chozo and Samus here.
Absolutely, yeah. And I do want to reiterate, that doesn't mean that this is the last Metroid game by any stretch. I mean, we already know Prime 4 is coming out, so there may be games that come in between, much like the Prime series. The Prime series takes place immediately after the first Metroid game, I believe. Yes, it definitely does.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. And then it's Metroid. It's Metroid 2, then Super Metroid,
then Fusion, and then here we are.
Yes.
I guess Other M. Other M is after Super Metroid, if you want to count that one.
Oh, god damn, we don't count Other M. Oh, God. I rewatched the scene where you see Ridley for the first time, and it annoyed me even more the second time around. But yes, we can see that the Chozo here is clearly controlling something from some sort of console, and I'm thinking maybe the Chozo is controlling the Emmy.
I think that make a lot of sense. We've definitely seen traces of the Chozo, and it also looks like a Galactic Federation structure, so it's most likely they've taken over it, and they've taken over the Emmy, as you just said.
Maybe the Chozo is trying to bring back the Chozo race, or trying to destroy Samus. Maybe they're jealous of Samus.
It could be something to do with Metroids as well. I mean, the Chozo made the Metroids, and Samus kind of... I think... It's hard to say exactly what happened. I think Samus basically killed all traces of the X-Parasite and the Metroids at the end of Fusion. Because the Galactic Federation were trying to clone the Metroids, and then Samus crashed the ship into SR-388. So maybe they are trying to make Metroids again.
Maybe. I mean, to be fair, this is a series where everything's so technologically advanced. The idea of killing an entire species or even just an individual is not laughable, but it's never a done deal. Like, how many times has Ridley come back? I'm fairly certain the reason that Ridley's body is on the bottle ship in Metroid Fusion is because when Samus killed Ridley in, I believe, Super Metroid, blood on her armor was taken by the Galactic Federation. That they tried to clone him unsuccessfully, and then the X-Parasite got all busy up inside, and it's just like, I've made Ridley really easily. But yeah, seriously, if there's even a speck of DNA, or even just like a Chozo, someone who knows maybe how to make Metroids, it's never a done deal. So I don't think the Metroids are dead yet.
Absolutely not. And as they said earlier, this is Samus's last chapter with the Metroids, so we know they have some kind of relevance in the story.
I wonder what they're going to call the series afterwards. If not Metroid, then...
just call it Samus.
Just X. But moving on, yeah, we see some sort of swiping action, but... Oh, hang on. I've just noticed the Chozo is moving its beak. It's talking, maybe?
Oh, that's weird. Do you think it's going to have voice acting?
I don't know how I mean... Maybe it would be like sort of not like actual English voice acting, but kind of like in like a Metroid Prime 2. I'm just because I'm looking at the amiibo now, kind of like Banjo Gobbledygook, which then has subtitles.
Yeah, I can't imagine taking this seriously with an English voice. This has to be gibberish.
I'd like if just got this image now in my head of a Chozo, but it's a bit bird-like. So before they say anything, it's like, "Rah! I'm gonna kill you, Samus."
Please don't do that.
Don't do that, Sakamoto. Although it's already been done, as in the game's in development.
It's too late.
That it's been done. But here we can see Samus getting a power-up. I imagine maybe the charge beam?
Maybe, yeah.
Chozo statue to the left.
Yeah, probably is the charge beam in that case.
Yeah. Not really a lot to say there. Here we go. Here's Green Emmy, who...
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting here. Samus does not have the red cursor around her.
I think maybe they haven't spotted them yet, because the yellow circles are still coming out, which means that you're making sound and you haven't been pursued yet.
Maybe.
So I think they're just out of sight, and Samus is about to use her cloaking Aeon. And when she uses that, you can see the yellow bar start to drain as well.
Let's have a look. I'm just curious to see if there's even a single moment. Let's go through frame by frame, because we can. So why not? So yeah, there's a yellow thing around that. Yeah, that definitely looks like, as you say, you're making noise and it's trying to come after you. Actually, it stays. Is that maybe the last known location?
I think so. I think it's pretty generous here too, because the face definitely comes up to the surface, but the yellow sort of visor where it's looking hasn't spawned yet, so I think you've definitely got a bit of leeway for when you can be spotted.
Yeah, but we do see that if we go through here... Hey, compression errors. Marvellous. Let's try and get rid of those.
Just as the yellow sort of scan appears, Samus transforms.
Yes.
Well, not transforms, but cloaks herself.
And we get the same circular yellow marker around her. So I think, again, that's like last known location, but the Emmy then scans for her. Can't find her. It's like, what's going on? Where's Samusy girl? And then decides to move on in quite a twisted fashion, which I kind of love and kind of hate at the same time.
So the white one didn't do this. The white one would just sort of run around and, I guess, just sort of jump like you would. It would climb up platforms to go exactly where you would. But this one's climbing up a surface which Samus absolutely can't climb. So I think that's the unique aspect of the yellow-green one, is they can climb.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you said, the Eon meter goes down there, as you can see. So yeah, using that sort of cloaking ability definitely drains your Eon meter. And then we see Samus using the spider crawl, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, basically the spider ball from Metroid 2, but I guess you don't go in a ball in this one.
To be fair, the spider ball was great, don't get me wrong, but it was kind of... it was so open, you could use it in almost any area.
Sure.
And that must have been a bit of a pain to... to kind of design the game around that to make sure that there aren't areas where you can completely destroy the game. Much easier on a smaller game like Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, but here maybe they just decided to limit things.
I think I kind of prefer that, to be honest, because there were moments in Metroid 2 where you'd search every room with a spider ball.
Yeah.
Because you can, whereas now it's pretty clear where you can and can't crawl.
Yeah, and there were times where you just had to crawl up a massive, massive wall to get on the top of something, and it was interesting enough when you did it once, but you had to do it like twice or three times, and it got a little bit...
Sure, and this is just faster too.
Absolutely, yeah. But we can see one of those gates up in the top left-hand corner that you mentioned before, with like the shifting voxels.
Yeah, so that leads to an Emmy encounter.
Yep. And interestingly, on the minimap, we can see like a yellow highlight over a previous room, or maybe it's not a previous room. But maybe that's a hazardous area, it's really hot or something, as we've seen in previous games where you require the Varia suit and things like that. Who knows? But it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense, I think. We've seen in the treehouse, and I think a couple of scenes here, there's areas with a bunch of water, and there's water physics in this game, so you'll break open a barrier and the water sort of flows out. and you can kind of see like maybe a little watery surface on the yellow area there, but maybe that's lava rather than water.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it could be so many things. We're just going to have to wait and see, but a perfectly reasonable explanation. And we see, presumably this is kind of like an expansion of the spider crawl, where Samus can grab onto a surface and then it moves up and down, presumably independently.
Yeah, I quite like this as well. I mean, the spider boss was saying earlier, you can put down bombs, but you're pretty vulnerable when using it, whereas this just gives you, a lot of power while you're climbing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we
also,
move on.
There's a carcass back there. Like you can see like a rib cage on the floor just before the...
Yeah, in fact, there's two of them.
God, what happened here?
Yeah, or what has happened here.
Yeah.
Amiga Metroids? I don't even know if they have bones.
I'm not sure. Good question. Let us know comments.
Yeah. And we can see an interesting section here where clearly you've come through in the morph ball. Let's try and do it frame by frame so we can really see. So you come through here in the morph ball. Maybe you're running from something? It's hard to tell, but there's clearly, like, there's fire around. Maybe there's something blowing up. The missiles are now at 41, which... What multiples are they using?
Yeah, what are they using?
Or maybe it's just individual. Maybe it's just one each time.
Maybe. I think what we were saying earlier about the fire room, potentially, that this definitely adds a lot to it, because this is a very hot area. And just on below this scene on the map, there's another red one too. So I'd be surprised if there isn't some sort of heat function going on.
Yeah, and maybe the yellow is some sort of toxic gas or something. Could be any sort of like hazard, but as you can see, Samus comes through here, gets out of her morph ball, and oh no, things are collapsing, watch out. This could well be just after getting an upgrade, and you have to use the upgrade. Maybe it is the morph ball in order to escape, because you can go through it one way, but not the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
And lots of flames coming down from the top. It's clearly a high-octane scene, and we see some sort of boss here. This is some sort of beetly thing. I'm going to call Beetle Bob.
That's a good name for them. In fact, I'm not even sure if this is an actual boss, because we see a very similar enemy in the treehouse. And I think it might just be a big old regular enemy. And you can counter them when they sort of bring their claws in the air and go down. There's this big window for countering. So they go down relatively easy. But there's a lot of strength behind that oomph when they swing down.
Yeah. I do like it when they have larger enemies just as standard enemies as well. It just makes things a little bit more interesting and dynamic.
Yeah, we're seeing so much variety with the enemies here.
Yeah, which is something that Metroid hasn't exactly necessarily lacked, but more variety in my book is nearly always a good thing, within reason.
Yeah, for sure.
But then moving... Oh, yeah, we just see it just get destroyed by a charge shot. Probably not the only charge shot it's received, but... Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe this is kind of like how in Prime you would get a boss encounter, and then subsequently that boss would just be a large enemy. I always like those things.
Yeah, I think that's very possible, for sure.
And then we move on and we know this to be a boss.
Yeah, we've seen this is in the treehouse as well. There's a great finishing scene where Samus just doesn't even look at them, charges their shot, and just lifts it up and shoots them in the face, and then jumps over their tail. It's so cool. It's
very cinematic, very cool. Do check out the treehouse, by the way. That's you'll get a lot more bonus information as well. I've got to say though, this design somewhat reminds me slightly of the Amiga Metroid, with the semi sort of compound eyes, that sort of weird stretchy mouth. As you go further down the body, it looks a lot less like an Amiga Metroid.
I'm feeling that too. This room is so interesting as well. Like, are we standing in blood right now? And also, is that a Chozo statue in the background?
It looks like it could be, yeah. You can definitely see some sort of arm. Yeah, I think that maybe is a Chozo statue with some sort of cloak or something that it's holding over its torso.
Yeah. What's really cool too is in we don't see it in the trailer, but in the previous scene where we have that cinematic of the monster, when Samus sort of shoots them and it hits the ground, like blood splatters off the floor. So I'm pretty sure we are in a room of blood right now.
Nice. Definitely getting that teen rating. That's a point.
Yeah.
Metroid games have generally been lower rating than that, haven't they? From what I remember.
I think so. I'm pretty sure. I think Prime 3 might have been like a 12 or something, but...
Whoa, yeah, not a 12!
I know. getting up there.
Yeah. That's a different rating system for anyone who's confused. We have like ages in the UK, don't we, with the PEGI system.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see plenty of that. Oh, and here we have I'm pretty damn sure this is a different Emmy again. Compression artifacts.
Yeah.
Yes, this is definitely, it's way more yellow than the last one. And it appears to be using some sort of dash, as you can see there.
Oh, you're right.
And it's chasing after Samus. Samus is like, whoa! And then it cuts away to a different thing entirely. But yeah, I'm fairly certain this is, again, another Emmy with a different ability. And that's really exciting, because how many more are there?
Oh, I'm just picturing a scene at the end where all the Emmys come together, and you've got to deal with all their abilities at once.
Or they all merge to form a super Emmy that looks like Ridley.
Oh yeah. Xeon showed us this thing where the Emmys have Ridley's head, and I don't think that the Emmys are based on Ridley.
That's unofficial. I just want to make that clear. That's unofficial.
Yeah, it's very, very unofficial. I don't think it's true at all, but it does kind of look like it when they have Ridley's head.
Yeah, the claw hands, and the sort of the weird sort of shifting massive amounts of joints. Yeah. Quick question: do you want Ridley to be in this game?
Kind of no. I unless there's a good reason. I mean, Ridley never really has a great reason to come back, but I feel like at this point I think Samus has a lot of antagonists going on, and maybe Ridley doesn't need to be in the fray.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm not against them putting Ridley in, as long as you say, there is a damned good reason for it. Because, yeah, Ridley kind of gets thrown around, and I get it. He never dies, and Ridley always comes back. I don't know. I really don't think he was needed in Samus Returns. I just sort of felt like the Queen Metroid was a perfectly good final boss. The sort of the twist, it's kind of expected at this point that Ridley is going to be in every single game. I think the last, arguably quote-unquote mainline Metroid game that Ridley wasn't in was Prime 2.
Yeah. I will say in Samus Returns, the Ridley fight is probably my favourite in the entire series, and it does make the Prime canon, which people didn't think was actually canon for a while, but you can see the transition from Ridley to Meta Ridley, so that's cool. But I do agree, it does sort of undermine the rest of the ending of Metroid 2, though.
Yeah, I mean, surely wouldn't it be Meta Ridley turning back or removing the augments? Yeah,
the other way around.
Yeah. Metroid canon is complicated.
Yeah.
But moving on, we've seen this before, and this is interesting. We see this is another Emmy that is clearly damaged.
So I think they've done the shot I was talking about earlier on the treehouse, where they've kind of mained them by shooting their eye. It's
possible, or maybe this is an Emmy that Samus somehow defeated before and is now coming back, and it doesn't appear to have quite as many parts. Does that mean it's lighter and faster and even more dangerous because it's damaged, like a wounded animal?
Maybe. I think we're definitely going to be able to take these things down eventually, just not in regular encounters. They'll chase you around, and maybe there'll be a boss battle where they're vulnerable in some kind of respect, and maybe that's what we're seeing here.
Maybe. I always love enemies that you can't kill. I know it sounds stupid, but Nemesis?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that kind of system. And especially when it's done right. Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 Remake was very rarely used, and it kind of undermined him a lot. Whereas it looks like this game is relying on the Emmy a lot. We've seen a bunch of those pixelated voxel gates.
Yeah.
So hopefully they have a pretty big part in this.
Yeah, I'm really hoping they do. I don't want them to be rare. I want them to be something that maybe you can predict, or maybe the Emmy are stuck in those locations due to some sort of programming thing or something, and maybe this is one that has somehow forced its way through one of those gates, is now damaged, but can go anywhere.
I'd love that. That's such a good idea.
That'd be great.
Please.
It can just randomly appear every so often once you're, sort of over halfway through the game or something. I'd love that. Just you never know whether it's going to appear, and because it's damaged, maybe you can stun it or something like that, but still, if it grabs you, it's game over. I love a challenge like that.
Yeah, please. Please,
Nintendo, listen to our pleas. It then zooms in, and it comes up, and it says, Metroid Dread. I think that's the planet in the background.
Yeah, that's probably a fair guess. But yeah, I think that's all the trailer for now.
Yeah, I mean, it carries on a little bit. As you can see, let's just skip forward a little bit. It shows the date, which I got wrong at first because American dates. I get thrown every so often. Doesn't matter how many times I see them. And it did his little glitch thing. Maybe it's probably meaningless. And more of it. And then it says Nintendo. But let's get back to a more interesting shot for the final bit. Let's scrub really far back and get a nice shot. That's not it. Maybe that. Let's stick on that while we sum up.
That's a nice boy.
Yeah, I'm going to call him Harold.
Yeah, that's a good name for him.
So yeah, that is the trailer. No doubt there are some things we've missed. That's always the case. You can analyze a trailer to death, and we've had a fair amount of speculation as well. But if you've noticed something we haven't, let us know down there in the comments. But I don't know about you, John, but after diving into this trailer again, for like the 7th time, I think, personally, I'm even more excited. Every time I see this trailer, I'm just like, it is the 2D Metroid that I've always wanted.
It looks absolutely perfect. And there are so many cool details in there. Like in the treehouse, they specified, and they showcased it, that when Samus puts her arm cannon against a wall, she bends it. Like, it doesn't just clip through the wall. She actually manages to morph around it.
That's such a small detail, a cool but it makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it?
Yeah. And also in the development video, they showed a bit of the prologue, which kind of recreates Metroid Fusion's opening, but in a gorgeous new illustration. So it's definitely going to fill in not only the previous events of Metroid, but probably the events between Fusion and Dread as well. So if you are coming in blind, you probably will miss out on some story details, but I think it's going to fill you in pretty well.
But anyway, that's everything. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you focus a charge beam on that subscribe button. Watch out, it's an Emmy! It's an Emmy! And be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.
What does the Emmy amiibo do? And does it make your Switch into a killer robot?
Yes.